How Amish men build a barn in one day without a single power tool. But here is what nobody talks about, and this part matters more than you think. It is not actually the speed that makes a barn raising possible. It is something far more profound. Stay with me, because at the very end of this video, I am going to reveal the real mechanism that allows 30 men to assemble a structure in a single day that would take modern contractors 2 weeks. And it will completely reframe how you think about community, preparation, and what it means to work together. If you have ever wondered how the Amish accomplish feats of coordination that seem almost impossible in our modern world, if you have watched videos of these barn raisings and felt that strange mix of fascination and disconnection, like you were witnessing something beautiful but somehow untranslatable to your own life, then subscribe to the channel, because we are breaking down the forgotten logic behind it. And before you go further, I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever been part of a community effort where everyone just knew their role without needing a meeting, a memo, or a project manager? Tell me your story. I read every comment, and the best ones shape what we cover next. Wait, this part is important, and I need your full attention for just a moment. The Amish do not build barns this way by accident. Every step, every tool, every person's position, it is documented in family knowledge that has been passed down not just through words, but through a system of observation and apprenticeship that begins in childhood. In fact, my complete guide on how community knowledge systems actually replace modern project management is available in the description and in the pinned comment below. It covers the 7 core principles that make coordination without electricity or digital communication not just possible, but more reliable than most corporate structures. It is a paid guide, but if you want to understand the deep mechanisms of what you are about to see, that is where the real secrets live. Because here is the truth that modern builders will never understand. A barn raised in one day is not fast because the work is rushed. It is fast because every single person involved has already done their part before they arrive. 3 weeks before the barn raising, the men who will assemble the frame have already gathered in preparation. They have selected the timber. They have dimensioned every board, every rafter, every joint. The joinery is cut, the holes are drilled, the connections are tested. Nothing is left to measurement on the day of the raising. There is no, let us figure this out as we go. There are no surprises, there are no delays waiting for the right-sized piece. What takes the modern construction crew 2 weeks, measuring, cutting, fitting, adjusting, waiting for materials, fixing mistakes, the Amish have already compressed into preparation. The barn raising itself becomes simply the assembly of pre-made components, but that is not even the deepest layer. Every man who will touch that timber knows, from the moment he was young enough to walk, how to use every tool that will be in his hands. He has practiced the motions thousands of times. He can read a wooden joint by looking at it. He can estimate a cut with his eye. His hands have the memory of the work encoded into them through decades of repetition. The Amish do not teach carpentry the way modern schools do, with lectures, with certifications, with theory. They live it. A boy learns to plane wood by standing beside his father, mirroring his motion, year after year, until the motion becomes as natural as walking. This means that on the day of the raising, there is no learning curve. There are no questions about method. There is no conflict about the best way to do something. Everyone already knows. Everyone has prepared. Everyone has trained their entire lives for this singular day. Now, here is where it gets counterintuitive. Most people who watch a barn raising think the miracle is the speed. They see the entire structure come together in 8 hours and assume the secret must be some magical technique, some efficiency hack that modern construction simply has not discovered yet. But that is backwards. The speed is just the visible result of something much more important, a culture of radical preparation and total knowledge standardization. Before the 1800s, this was how all construction worked in America, in Europe, everywhere. Barn raisings were not unique to the Amish. They were the standard for rural communities, and they operated on exactly the same principle: preparation, knowledge, repetition, and community coordination, replacing individual heroics and improvisation. But something changed. As power tools became standard, something was lost. The need for deep hand tool knowledge disappeared. Training compressed. The idea that a builder should have thousands of hours of repetitive practice before he touched a real job site seemed inefficient. Speed could be purchased. A contractor could hire someone with a power saw and make faster cuts, even if those cuts were less precise, even if they required more adjustment later. The trade-off seemed obvious. Abandon the long apprenticeship, the community knowledge, the preparation phase, and gain individual speed. And in the short term, it worked. You could build faster. But you sacrificed something irreplaceable: the ability to coordinate without infrastructure, the ability to move from planning to execution seamlessly, the ability to know, absolutely, that every person in the group understands not just what to do, but why. Each motion matters. The Amish have kept something alive that the rest of the world has almost completely abandoned: the understanding that preparation, knowledge, and community coordination are not obstacles to efficiency. They are efficiency. And this is where most people get it wrong. They think the barn raising is an example of hard work. They think it is about strength or determination or community spirit in the abstract sense. You know, the warm, fuzzy feeling of people coming together. But that misses the actual point entirely. The barn raising is not hard at all. It is the opposite of hard. It is easy. It is efficient. It is elegant. The reason it looks so impressive is precisely because it is so well organized that barely any wasted energy is visible. The men are not straining. They are not improvising. They are not problem-solving in real time. They are executing. And execution, when it is truly prepared for, is the easiest, most energy-efficient way to work. This is the part where I need to pause and remind you of something crucial. The reason the Amish can build a barn in one day is not because they have some special technique. It is because they have preserved a system of knowledge creation and transfer that our modern world has almost entirely replaced. And if you want to understand that system deeply, the 7 principles that replace project management software, the psychology of knowledge standardization, the economic mathematics of preparation versus improvisation, that is all covered in the comprehensive guide available in the description and pinned below. This is the resource that explains not just the what of barn raisings, but the why. Underneath everything you are seeing, it is a detailed guide, not free, but absolutely worth the investment if you want to think differently about how work actually gets done when the systems work. Because here is what changes your understanding. Most modern people think efficiency means working faster. Amish culture understands that efficiency means preparing better, and those are 2 completely different philosophies that lead to entirely different results. End of part 1. Part 2 follows below, continuing the script. Now, let us talk about what this actually means for you, even if you never build another barn in your life. Because the principle here extends far beyond carpentry. It applies to any skill, any craft, any work that requires coordination between multiple people. And understanding it can completely change how you approach your own preparation for any significant undertaking. The Amish apprenticeship system is not unique because it is Amish. It is powerful because it applies the same principle that every elite performer, every master craftsman, every well-coordinated organization follows. Deep preparation and standardized knowledge create the appearance of effortless execution. A professional chef does not invent his techniques on the fly while service is happening. He has prepared and practiced every motion thousands of times. The ingredients are pre-measured. The setup is identical every night. When service begins, he is simply executing. A surgical team does not figure out the procedure as they go. They have rehearsed it, they know it, they execute it. The efficiency looks magical until you understand that every single person has prepared thoroughly. And this is where the barn raising reveals another forgotten skill: the coordination of logistics and nourishment as a form of skilled labor. The women who feed a barn raising are not just bringing lunch. They are sustaining an energy system. They are timing meals so food arrives when workers need it, not before or after. They are coordinating with dozens of other women across the community, each one knowing exactly what dish she is responsible for, eliminating duplication and ensuring variety. They are managing temperature, pacing, and presentation, so that men can eat quickly and return to work without distraction. This is expertise. It is a skill set that takes years to develop, and it is as essential to the success of the barn raising as the carpentry is. Our modern world has almost completely devalued this type of work. We have separated cooking from carpentry, logistics from labor, sustenance from the main work. We have turned feeding people into a service industry separate from production, and in doing so, we have lost the understanding that they are integrated systems. The Amish have not lost this. The barn raising works because every person, the carpenter, the timber cutter, the beam positioner, the nail driver, the woman preparing food, the person hauling water, the child organizing materials, understands that their role is essential and interdependent. And here is what is truly forgotten about this model. It worked on smaller scales and larger scales because the principle was the same whether you were building a barn or a cathedral. Medieval cathedral builders would spend months preparing materials. Every stone was pre-cut. Every piece of timber was pre-shaped. The workers were organized into guilds where knowledge was standardized and preserved. The process was slow and methodical, but the coordination was flawless, and the structures that emerged have lasted 1,000 years. The Amish barn raising is a compressed version of the same principle. Same knowledge system, same preparation, same coordination, different timescale. Because that is another forgotten truth. A barn built this way does not need maintenance. The joinery is so precise that it distributes stress evenly. The wood is so carefully selected and prepared that it does not warp or fail. The design is so proven that it does not require revision. Contrast this with the modern construction process. Materials are ordered with tolerances, adjustments are made on site, mistakes are discovered after the work is done and have to be patched. The structure is completed in the sense that the walls are up and the roof is on, but the real work, the adjustments, the fixes, the hidden problems discovered after move-in, continues for months or years. The Amish barn is complete on the day it is built. It is finished. It is ready. It will stand unchanged for generations. And this brings us to the question that most people never ask. If the Amish method is so efficient, so elegant, so superior in its results, why has the modern world abandoned it? The answer is not because we discovered something better. It is because we discovered something faster to sell. Power tools, power equipment, rapid cycle construction. These do not actually produce better buildings. They produce more buildings in less clock time, with less training required. A contractor can hire someone off the street who knows how to use a power saw in a week. He would need a decade to develop the hand tool knowledge that would let him participate effectively in an Amish barn raising. From a capitalist perspective, that is progress. From a craft perspective, it is catastrophic. We have traded knowledge and preparation for speed and volume, and in the short term, it works. You can build more homes, more buildings, more things. But the quality drops, the process becomes more fragmented, the coordination becomes harder, and the buildings themselves become more disposable. An Amish barn is built assuming it will be there in 100 years. Modern construction often assumes it will be rebuilt or renovated within 30. Those are different philosophies, different time horizons, different definitions of success. Now, I want to bring this back to something that matters for you, regardless of whether you ever build a barn or not. The question is not, how can I build a barn in one day? The real question is, what would change in my life if I approached any significant project using the Amish principle instead of the modern principle? What if, instead of trying to do something as fast as possible with whatever knowledge I currently have, I spent weeks or months preparing so thoroughly that the execution becomes almost effortless? This applies to learning an instrument, writing a book, starting a business, learning a skill, running a household. The path to excellence is not to dive in and learn as you go. It is to prepare so thoroughly that when you begin, you are simply executing what you have already internalized. And this is the moment where I need to circle back and make sure you understand the full depth of what is happening in a barn raising, because we have only covered part of it. Part 3 follows below, to be continued. Here is what has been lost in translation. The barn raising is not a single event. It is the visible culmination of an entire system of knowledge, preparation, apprenticeship, and community coordination that takes place over months or even years. Most people watch the video of a barn raising, see 8 hours of work, and try to copy the 8 hours. They do not see the months of preparation. They do not see the decades of apprenticeship. They do not see the generations of knowledge that made those 8 hours possible. It is like watching an Olympic athlete and thinking that if you just train harder the week before the competition, you will perform better. You are looking at the final manifestation without understanding the foundation. Every single man at that barn raising began exactly here. Not at the barn raising, here. Learning to sharpen a blade correctly. Learning to hold a tool with the right grip. Learning to read grain and wood. Learning to think in terms of joinery, not just nails and fasteners. By the time he was old enough to help with a barn raising, he had already spent thousands of hours preparing. And this is the mechanism that modern education and modern training has almost completely abandoned. We have decided that knowledge can be compressed. We can teach carpentry in a semester. We can teach cooking in a year. We can teach business in a 4-year degree. And then we send people into the world expecting them to perform at the level of someone who has been embedded in that knowledge system their entire life. The Amish approach understands that some knowledge cannot be compressed. It must be lived. It must be accumulated through thousands of repetitions. It must become so automatic that it does not require conscious thought. His hands are not thinking. His hands are... And that is the difference between training and education. Training gives you knowledge. Preparation gives you confidence. Apprenticeship gives you automation, the ability to perform the complex task without having to consciously think about each step. This is the real secret of the barn raising. Every person here knew their role. No one had to be told what to do. No one had to ask questions. No one had to wait for permission or instruction. They simply arrived, they executed, and the structure was complete. This is what a well-prepared system looks like when everyone in it has done the preparation. And here is the most counterintuitive part of all. This method is faster, not because people are working harder, but because there is no friction. There is no waiting. There is no figuring things out. There is no redoing work because of mistakes. The speed emerges from the preparation, not from the intensity of effort. In fact, the barn raising is remarkable precisely because it looks so calm. No one is rushing. No one is stressed. The work is moving at a sustainable pace because everything has been prepared so thoroughly that speed becomes irrelevant. Fast does not mean frantic. Fast means prepared. And this is where I need to pause and remind you of something that matters if you want to go deeper with this. Because we have covered the visible part, the barn raising, the technique, the coordination, but the framework behind it, the psychological principles that make a culture of preparation possible, the economic decisions that led the Amish to preserve these skills while the rest of the world abandoned them. That is all covered in the detailed guide available in the description and pinned in the comments. This is not a basic how-to. This is the comprehensive system that explains why the Amish approach works. How? You can apply these principles to your own preparation and projects, and what the cost of abandoning this knowledge has been for our modern world. It is available now, and if you want to move from watching these examples to actually understanding the deeper system, that guide is where all the keys are. Because here is what most people miss when they watch a barn raising. It is not a remarkable display of speed or strength or even community spirit. It is a demonstration of a knowledge system that has chosen permanence over convenience, quality over quantity, and preparation over improvisation. And that choice was made generations ago. The Amish did not decide yesterday to preserve these skills. They made that choice 300 years ago, and they have been consistent with it ever since. Every boy who learns to work with his hands is part of that chain. Every barn that is built to last centuries is part of that continuity. Every community that gathers to do work together is reinforcing the principle that preparation and knowledge cannot be replaced by machinery or speed. And the question this raises for you is not, how can I build a barn in one day? The question is, what in my life am I trying to do fast that I should instead prepare thoroughly for? What skill am I trying to learn quickly that would serve me far better if I embedded it deeply through repetition and practice? What project am I rushing toward that would be better served by spending months in preparation so that the execution becomes effortless? The barn raising teaches you that the way to do impossible things is not to work harder. It is to prepare better. It is done, and it will stand for generations. But here is where the Amish secret truly diverges from modern survival thinking. Most of us believe that survival skills are about crisis, about what you do when everything falls apart. We imagine a power grid failure, a natural disaster, a moment of sudden emergency, and we panic prepare. Buying gear, memorizing facts, trying to cram months of knowledge into weeks. The Amish understand something deeper. For them, survival skills are not emergency measures. They are daily life. This is the hidden lesson that almost everyone misses when they watch a barn raising. You see the speed, the coordination, the impressive feat, and you think the skill lies in the event itself, but it does not. The skill lies in what happened before the event, in the years of training, the daily practice, the embedded knowledge that makes the event possible. Every single man who shows up to that barn raising has been practicing his craft for years, often since childhood. He knows how to read wood, he knows how his tools respond to different angles and pressures. He has built a dozen smaller structures before this one. His hands know what to do before his mind has to think about it. And this is exactly how survival skills worked for your ancestors, for the Amish, for the pioneers, for anyone who lived close to the land. They did not learn emergency survival separate from their regular life. They lived survival daily. They made fire every morning. They preserved food every season. They built shelter, purified water, navigated by stars, crafted tools, not because they were in crisis, but because that was simply what you did to take care of your household. Before we continue, and this is important, so keep this in mind for a second, the full system of how these forgotten skills actually integrate into a livable homestead routine is explained in depth in my complete homestead survival guide, which breaks down not just the techniques, but the seasonal rhythms, the tool progressions, and the daily habits that make each skill stick permanently. That guide is available in the description and pinned in the comments. It is the deep dive that turns scattered knowledge into a working system you can actually live by. So when we talk about how Amish men build a barn in one day without a single power tool, what we are really looking at is the visible peak of an iceberg of preparation that most people never see. Let me walk you through what that preparation actually looks like, because this is where your ancestors' approach to survival differs radically from modern prepper culture. First, material knowledge. An Amish carpenter does not just know wood, he knows specific wood. He can look at a timber and know its age, its density, how it will behave as it dries, whether it will crack or warp or hold true. He knows which wood is best for weight-bearing beams, and which for framing, and which for finish work. This knowledge comes from years of working with different species, different seasons, different moisture conditions. Modern survival books will tell you, find a straight tree and fell it. Your ancestor would have already selected the tree months earlier, cut it at the right time of year, dried it properly, and understood exactly how it would perform when built into a structure. This is the difference between knowing a fact and knowing a practice. Second, tool competency. Before a man shows up to a barn raising, he has spent thousands of hours with his tools. His chisels, his saws, his planes, his hammers, they are extensions of his hands. He does not think about using them. He just moves, and the tool does what is needed. There is no hesitation, no correction, no wasted motion. A modern person might have a garage full of expensive tools. But how many hours have you actually spent with them? How many times have you stood at a workbench and repeated the same motion until it became automatic? This is where survival skills actually live, in the 10,000 hours of quiet, unglamorous practice. Your great-grandparents knew this. They did not learn survival skills from a book or a 3-day course. They learned by doing it repeatedly, year after year, until the knowledge became part of their muscle memory and intuition. Third, the understanding of systems. When a barn raising happens, the structure is not being invented on the spot. Every joint, every angle, every measurement has been thought through ahead of time. The men who arrive at the site know not just how to cut wood, but how that wood will fit into a larger system, how the foundation connects to the frame, how the frame distributes weight, how each piece supports and is supported by the pieces around it. This is systems thinking, and it is one of the most important survival skills that modern education has almost completely erased. Your ancestors did not just know how to chop wood, or build a fire, or preserve food in isolation. They understood how these skills connected. How a properly prepared root cellar meant you would not starve in winter. How knowing the stars meant you could find your way home. How building shelter correctly meant the difference between survival and freezing. Each skill was part of a larger web of interdependence. This is the secret that the barn raising reveals about survival itself. The men who show up to raise a barn do not just show up. They bring not just their skills, but the entire infrastructure of knowledge and preparation that made their skills possible. They bring tools that have been maintained and sharpened and stored carefully. They bring an understanding of the land and the weather and the materials. They bring a community that has practiced working together on smaller projects throughout the year. And they bring confidence, the deep, quiet confidence that comes from knowing you have prepared thoroughly. So what does this mean for you? Someone living in a modern world, someone who wants to reclaim the survival skills that your ancestors lived with every day. It means this. You cannot become competent in survival skills through passion or panic or weekend courses. You cannot download a PDF and suddenly know how to purify water without modern equipment, or preserve meat, or navigate by stars, or identify edible plants, or build a shelter that will actually keep you alive. You have to embed these skills into your daily life, the way the Amish do. You have to practice them repeatedly. You have to understand them as systems, not as isolated facts. You have to build the infrastructure of knowledge and tools and preparation that makes the actual survival possible. This is why the Amish build a barn in one day, not because they are faster than you, but because they have already done the months and years of preparation that makes the day itself seem effortless. And this is the real survival secret that your great-grandparents knew, and that modern culture has almost completely forgotten. The question is, are you ready to do what they did? Now, let me show you the 4 forgotten survival skills that directly parallel the barn raising process. The skills that, like the barn itself, require preparation, practice, and systems thinking to work correctly. These are the techniques that the Amish use every day, that your ancestors knew by heart, and that most modern people have lost completely. Skill 1. Fire without matches. Let me start with the most fundamental survival skill, the one that every single person in the Amish community has practiced since childhood. The one that your ancestors knew so well they could do it in the dark, in the rain, in conditions that would terrify most modern people. Making fire without matches. Now, here is what most survival guides get wrong about this skill. They treat it like a parlor trick, something impressive but ultimately unnecessary, because you can just use a lighter or matches. And technically, that is true. But that misses the entire point of why your ancestors knew how to do this. Fire starting without matches was not a backup plan for them. It was their primary skill. Every person, from age 7 onward, practiced this until they could do it reliably, in any weather, with materials found nearby. And the reason they could do this so consistently is that they had understood the system of fire making. They knew the materials, the techniques, and the progression. First, they understood tinder, the material that catches the spark or the ember. The Amish and pioneering families would spend time preparing tinder during the year. They would save the fluffy interior of cattails, gather and dry the best plant fibers, and crucially, they would make char cloth, a simple but brilliant technique where thin cotton is heated in a covered container with just a small air hole, turning it into a material that will ignite from the tiniest spark. Char cloth is one of those forgotten skills that seems pointless until you realize this one small square of cloth, kept in a dry place, will allow you to start a fire in almost any condition. It eliminates the biggest problem of friction-based fire starting, the struggle to get your tinder hot enough. With char cloth, a single spark will start a flame. But this is where modern survival culture fails most people. A typical fire-starting guide will tell you, make char cloth by char cloth, but it will not tell you the system behind why you would do this, how you would maintain it, how you would integrate it into an actual survival kit that you carry or keep prepared. Your ancestors did not read about char cloth. They made it as part of their regular household routine. They kept it stored carefully. They practiced using it until it became automatic. The second material you need is kindling. slightly larger pieces that catch fire from the tinder and burn hot enough to ignite larger wood. Kindling is not just random small branches. If you want reliable fire starting, your kindling needs to be dry, split so it has a larger surface area, and graded by size so you have a progression from the smallest twigs to pieces about the thickness of your finger. And here is the thing that most people miss. This preparation is part of the daily routine in cultures that rely on fire. You do not wait until you need to build a fire to look for kindling. You gather and prepare it as you move through your day. You see a deadfall branch, you gather it, you split it, you add it to your kindling bundle. By the time you actually need to start a fire, you already have prepared material waiting. This is the system's thinking that separates people who can reliably start fire from people who panic about it. The third component is your source of ignition, and here is where flint and steel comes in. Now, most survival guides will show you flint and steel and act like it is some mysterious ancient technique. It is not. It is actually quite straightforward, but it requires practice to become reliable. The principle is simple. When you strike steel against flint at the correct angle, you create sparks hot enough to ignite your charcloth tinder. The challenge is not understanding this. It is developing the muscle memory and the consistency to produce sparks reliably, especially when conditions are difficult. The Amish would practice this. A child learning fire starting would spend hours striking flint and steel, adjusting the angle, the force, the contact point, until they could produce a spark reliably. This is not glamorous. It is not dramatic. It is quiet, repetitive, unglamorous practice. And it is exactly how you develop a skill that will work when you actually need it. Flint and steel is superior to matches or lighters for one critical reason. It does not depend on any modern supply chain. You will not run out. You do not need to replace it. If it is kept dry, it will last you a lifetime. Your ancestors knew this. They carried flint and steel the way you might carry a phone, as a standard part of being prepared. The final element of reliable fire starting is understanding the progression of fuel. How to take that initial flame from the char cloth and build it up to a fire that will burn long and hot enough to cook food, warm shelter, or process materials. This progression goes char cloth and tinder, to kindling, to small branches, to larger wood, to the final fuel wood that will provide sustained heat. But here is the part that most modern people do not understand. Each step of this progression needs to be prepared ahead of time. You cannot build a fire efficiently if you have to search for each size of wood as you go. You need to have gathered and prepared wood in different sizes before you ever strike your flint. This is why the Amish and frontier families could start a fire so quickly, even in terrible conditions. By the time they needed fire, they had already done 90% of the work. The actual fire starting took minutes because everything was prepared. A modern person, untrained in this skill, would gather materials while trying to start the fire, struggling to find dry wood, failing repeatedly, becoming frustrated. The Amish would have spent 10 minutes gathering and organizing materials, and then the fire would ignite and be ready in moments. The difference is preparation. And this brings us back to the barn raising. Those men did not show up unprepared and figure out how to build on the spot. They arrived with tools sharpened, materials selected, a plan understood, and months or years of practice already embedded in their bodies. The same applies to fire starting. You cannot learn this from a 3-minute video. You have to practice it repeatedly, in different conditions, until your hands know what to do. Skill 2. Water purification without modern equipment. Now let's move to the second critical survival skill, one that your ancestors understood so well they could purify water anywhere, using only materials found in nature. Water purification without modern equipment. Most modern survival guides will tell you to either boil water or use purification tablets. Both of these depend on resources you might not have, but your ancestors had methods that required nothing but materials found in the environment. The most important of these is the sand and charcoal filter, a system so elegant and effective that it has been used for thousands of years, and which actually works better than you might expect for removing particulates and many microorganisms. Now, the critical part here is understanding what this filter actually does and what it does not do. This is where most people fail in their understanding of survival skills. They learn the technique but not the principles behind it. A sand and charcoal filter removes particulates, sediment, cloudiness, some bacteria and parasites that are trapped in the material. It can remove taste and odor, but it does not kill all waterborne pathogens. Viruses, for instance, are so small that they pass through even a well-made sand filter. So how did your ancestors deal with this? They used multiple methods in combination. The sand filter was one part of the system, but they also understood that moving water is safer than stagnant water, that sunlight has disinfectant properties, and that boiling, even if difficult, was the most reliable method of making water completely safe. The Amish, who still live without modern water treatment, understand this system deeply. They do not rely on a single method. They combine methods based on what is available and what conditions they face. If they are near a clean, fast-moving spring, they might drink with minimal purification. If they are near a river or pond, they filter and boil. If they have access to sunlight, they use solar disinfection as a backup method. This is systems thinking applied to water safety, understanding that no single method is perfect, but that combining methods creates reliability. The other forgotten method of water safety is simply understanding where safe water comes from. And this is knowledge that modern people have completely lost. Your ancestors knew that spring water coming directly from the ground was safer than surface water. They knew that water from a fast-moving stream was safer than stagnant water. They knew which plants grew near safe water sources and which indicated contamination. They observed animals. Animals will often travel to safe water sources. A network of animal trails leading to water suggests that location has been used and deemed safe. Conversely, water that smells of decay or is surrounded by dead vegetation should be avoided. This is the kind of practical knowledge that cannot be downloaded. It comes from spending time in the landscape and learning to read the signs. But here is the key. Your ancestors did not leave this knowledge to chance. They taught it to their children explicitly. They walked them through the landscape and said, "This is how you find safe water. This is what danger looks like. This is what you do." And the children learned through observation and practice. So if you want to reclaim this skill, it is not enough to memorize that sand filters work. You need to actually build one, test it, understand its limitations. You need to spend time near natural water sources and learn to read them. You need to practice boiling water, understanding how much fuel it takes, how long it takes at different elevations. You need to embed this knowledge into your actual life. And this is where we come back to the barn raising lesson. Those men could work together efficiently because they had practiced working together on smaller projects. You can purify water reliably in a survival situation because you have practiced the methods before the emergency comes. Skill 3. Food preservation without refrigeration. Let me move to the third critical skill, one that has shaped human civilization and that your ancestors depended on for survival through every winter. Food preservation without refrigeration. Now, this is a skill that the Amish still practice regularly, so we can observe it directly. And what becomes immediately obvious when you watch food preservation in action is that it is not a single skill. It is a system of multiple techniques, each suited to different foods, different seasons, and different purposes. Let me show you the 4 fundamental methods that your ancestors used, in roughly the order of difficulty and reliability. The first and simplest is drying. When you remove water from food, microorganisms cannot grow. It is that straightforward. And your ancestors knew hundreds of ways to do this. Drying meat in the sun, drying fruits, drying herbs, drying vegetables. The advantage of drying is that it requires no equipment and no special materials. You just need sun, air, and patience. A person living without modern technology can dry food effectively with nothing but a clean surface and an understanding of when conditions are right. But here is what gets left out of most instructions. You also need to understand what conditions prevent spoilage during drying. High humidity can ruin a drying batch. Insects can contaminate it. Animals can steal it. Rain can ruin weeks of work. Your ancestors solved these problems by building drying structures, racks in smokehouses, screens in attics, hanging areas with airflow. They understood the timing. Drying meat in the heat of summer, for instance, was risky unless you had a structure that protected it from flies and insects. The second method is smoking. And here is where the preservation system becomes more complex, because smoking serves multiple purposes at once. Smoke has antimicrobial properties. The compounds in smoke kill or repel bacteria. But smoke also adds flavor and color. So when your ancestors smoked meat or fish, they were doing three things: preserving it, flavoring it, and creating a barrier against insects. But smoking is not simple. Different foods require different temperatures and smoke densities. Fish might be cold smoked at temperatures below 90 degrees to prevent the fat from becoming rancid. Meat might be hot smoked at higher temperatures to both smoke and partially cook it. And the choice of wood matters. Soft woods produce creosote that tastes bad, while harder woods like oak and hickory produce a cleaner smoke. This is the kind of specific knowledge that you cannot learn from a general list. You have to learn it from someone who has done it, or you have to practice and fail and adjust until you understand it yourself. The third method is fermentation, and this is where food preservation actually becomes more nutritious than the fresh version. When you ferment vegetables, cabbage into sauerkraut, cucumbers into pickles, turnips into a tangy condiment, the bacteria that naturally live on the vegetables actually multiply and create lactic acid. That acid preserves the food, but here is the remarkable part. It also makes the nutrients more bioavailable. Your body can actually absorb more of the vitamins and minerals from fermented vegetables than from fresh ones. An Amish family does not think of fermentation as a preservation technique. They think of it as improving food, creating something better than what nature gave them. A jar of sauerkraut sitting in a cool cellar does not just keep cabbage alive through winter. It becomes medicine. It becomes nutrition that strengthens digestion and immune function in the months when fresh greens are gone. Most modern people ferment by accident. They forget something in the fridge, and weeks later they find it has gone sour. They throw it away. To an Amish cook, that exact same jar is the beginning of something valuable. It is intention. It is control. It is understanding that food does not have to be killed by heat and sealed in a vacuum to survive. Sometimes, food survives by transforming into something else entirely. That is the secret I promised you at the beginning of this video. The reason an Amish man can build a barn in one day without a power tool is not because he is stronger or faster than you. It is because he is part of a system. A system where knowledge is preserved as carefully as food. A system where the person standing next to him was taught by someone who was taught by someone who came before. There is no guesswork. There is no YouTube tutorial. There is only the accumulated skill of generations, passed hand to hand, season to season. The same principle applies to food preservation. It is not a trick. It is not a shortcut. It is knowledge that your great-grandparents did not have to memorize, because they lived it every single day. They did not preserve food by thinking about it. They preserved it by doing it, by understanding the natural forces at work, by trusting the process. If you want to truly understand how to preserve food without electricity, without refrigeration, without modern technology, you need to stop thinking like a survivalist and start thinking like a gardener, like a farmer, like someone whose family depends on the food they put away today feeding them in January. That mindset changes everything, because when you think that way, you understand that preservation is not about the technique alone. It is about planning. It is about understanding your climate. It is about knowing exactly how much food you will need, how long it needs to last, and which method will keep it longest and keep it safest. It is about building redundancy, never putting all your preserved food in one method, never trusting a single source. This is why an Amish family does not panic when the power goes out. It is not because they have superhuman survival skills. It is because they have already preserved their food. They have already built their systems. They are not learning how to survive in the emergency. They are already living by the systems that make emergencies impossible. Here is the challenge for you this week. Pick one preserved food from your pantry. Any one. A jar of pickles, a can of beans, dried fruit, anything. Look at it. Really look at it. Then ask yourself, if I had to make this from scratch, with no store to buy it from, no electricity, no equipment except what I could make or find, could I do it? Not someday. Not eventually. Right now. Do not answer right now. Let that question sit with you. Because when you start asking it for every piece of food you eat, when you start understanding the connection between the work done months ago and the meal on your plate today, that is when you will understand what the Amish have always known. Food preservation is not a survival technique. It is a relationship with time itself. Thank you for watching this far. It means you are the kind of person who wants to understand the real principles behind survival and self-sufficiency, not just memorize tricks. If you found this valuable, please subscribe to Forgotten Roots Survival so you never miss a new video about the lost skills that made our ancestors strong. Leave a comment below and tell me, which of these 3 preservation methods are you most drawn to learning first? And hit that notification bell, because we upload new videos every week and I want to make sure you see each one as soon as it goes live.